I think.
Shannon, the special meeting we have is on is it the
Getting in the groove, or is it still pretty? This is a tough time of year because of finals and everything.
No, and I think that there were
At a certain point, we just have to
Yeah,
plow
I mean,
forward.
there's nothing.
other things that, no, I
Like,
didn't,
the
sorry. It must be a big Monday game.
And being like wrapping it up, like the last test.
don't-
Oh my God,
well, it's not a league game.
Okay,
So,
all right.
You don't
Because it's
realize
my
it.
first year
There's like
doing it,
50
so.
if it's a league
I
game, I
do,
can see it.
yeah, it's really fun. And I have a
It's supposed to be a 4-hour-long
I mean,
And we're starting.
we're such failures
We're so
that we
bad
can't
at
But
figure
a lot,
Yeah, they're like, this
but
is
it's kind of a gen ed class, so it's lots of different majors and lots of diversity
We're in at 6.
compared with when I went to KU. So gender.
Meeting. First item on our agenda is approving an agenda.
I move we approve the agenda.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and our next item of business is executive session to discuss the superintendent evaluation. So I'm going to make the motion. I move we go into executive session to protect the privacy interests of the individual to be discussed, discussing a personnel matter of non-elected personnel, with the board to return to open session in this room at 6:30.
Okay.
Second. I'm like, okay. Sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
At least it wasn't here. Last time I was like, here.
I don't, I mean, you and Vanessa can
a break. We will now move to the report of the President of the Board. I have a couple of items to share tonight. Wanted to share that the board had a board lunch at Free State, which was a joint lunch with Free State and Lawrence High School on November 14th, and those in attendance had a chance to participate in a really good discussion about the district's approach to career and tech ed at both the high school buildings and the College and Career Center, in addition to talking about and learning a lot about how our career pathways work in that context. So it was a really informative learning opportunity. Also had a chance to attend the West Site Council meeting on November 14th and gave an update to their site council on the status and progress in our superintendent search. A couple of other events that week. On Wednesday the 16th, I had the pleasure of attending and recognizing many, many wonderful, outstanding volunteers for our district at all of our schools for the Friends of Education recognition ceremony. Some really amazing things that our community volunteers do in our schools, and sure am grateful for the time that they give to our students and our faculty and our community. So that was very cool. In addition, I was able to attend the LEA Fall Mixer on the 17th and to give some remarks to thank our educators in recognition of American Education Week. Had a lot of fun with our 2 newly elected board members who haven't joined the board yet. We got to help with the drawing that took place for gift baskets and prizes from business donations that night. So that was a lot of fun. And that's all I have for this evening. So I will turn it over to Dr. Stubblefield for the superintendent's report.
Good evening. I just have a few things to share. We're seeing a good response rate for our staff and parent and community online surveys. I would like to remind anyone who has not yet participated that we would like to hear your opinions about several district performance measures, the school calendar, high school start times, and other topics. The surveys may be found on our website. They close at midnight on December 8th. Congratulations to Lawrence High students newspaper, The Budget, for earning the National Scholastics Press Association's Pacemaker Award. We have extended an invitation to the advisor, Barb Tholin, to recognize her students at an upcoming board meeting, and that award is a really big deal. So kudos to the students and the sponsor for that award. Congratulations also to Free State High School students Lee Gordon Washington and Max Lilich. They are currently the top-ranked debate team in the state of Kansas. It was my pleasure before the fall break to present the Lawrence Master Teacher Award to Julie Battaglia. She does an excellent job teaching 6th grade science, supporting Liberty Memorial Central Middle School as a member of its building leadership team, and working with us at the district level to assist with the implementation of the next generation science standards. We will nominate Julie to Emporia State University's Kansas Master Teacher Program. My thanks to Run Lawrence organization and the Woodland School community. They host an annual Thanksgiving Day run and donate the majority of the event proceeds to our elementary school marathon clubs. A record 2,226 runners participated in the 5K and 1 mile fun run this year. This weekend, myself, along with some others, will be attending the KASB annual conference. Shannon will be elected as the president-elect, and and I
Predicted to happen.
we're predicting that. Well, she'll be nominated and elected. And I also will be serving on a diversity panel during that conference. Parents of students in grades 4 to 12 and their children are invited to attend an informational night to learn about participating in local and regional and state level science and engineering fairs. This event will be held here at the school district office on December 12th at 6:00 p.m. We also invite the public to join the board for its upcoming community conversation about board goals and student achievement and success on December 14th at 6:30 p.m. in the Lawrence Public Library Auditorium. This year's board goals includes holding at least one community conversation per semester to continue to engage the community in our school improvement efforts. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Stubblefield. All right, our next item on the agenda is patron commentary. I have a couple of forms, but they relate to an item that's on the agenda later. So do we have any other patron commentary this evening? No. Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to board commentary. Vanessa?
Yeah, we met as a board policy advisory committee today, Shannon and I, with Dave Cunningham. And I just wanted to give the board a brief update on some of those issues. We are getting closer to an MOU with the city around school zones and safe routes, and so that's good news. We kind of lobbed something back over to them for review, so it's getting closer. We discussed a fundraising policy, which I've actually spoken to you about previously, but that draft has been sent to building administrators and is going to be before the board as a first reading on December 11th. And I anticipate, or do we decide we're going to put it on the agenda and kind
We're
of
going to have
discuss
it, instead of having it on consent, we're actually going to talk about it because this would be a newly adopted policy for the district, although a lot of what's in it is current practice.
Being practice, yeah. But we actually don't have a fundraising policy as part of our board policy manual. So we're codifying some existing practices and also just kind of standardizing some existing practices and having some new practices that we are trying to ensure are applied consistently district-wide through this adoption, hopefully. So it'll be before us December 11th for first read, and we'll discuss it then. Just wanted to let you know. We also discussed our vending policy, which just needs a few tweaks, and talked about share tables. I don't know if any of you have received emails from patrons. It's kind of it was in the news and kind of on social media a lot a couple weeks ago, this idea that in order to combat waste of food that is unopened or uneaten, to provide opportunities for students to share those excesses with other students and or to a food bank or some service like that. And which sounds, important and a goal that everyone has to reduce waste and repurpose food for people that need it. So Paula Murish came from the district office, Director of Purchasing and Food Services, and talked to us about some of the barriers and also opportunities for that. It is interesting due to kind of stringent food handling requirements and all of the other things that have to be managed. Those situations are hard to manage with the staffing levels that we have. It's been important over the years with decreased funding in our district to have food services be a standalone, self-supporting entity within our budget. And so we don't actually have staffing within food services department to staff someone to kind of manage that kind of program, and not having, it can't just be like a table that's designated where people throw whatever they want to. And so it has to actually be coordinated with somebody. Through that conversation, we did get a chance to learn about a really awesome program that our district is partnering with Just Food to coordinate sharing our excess food kind of on the back end. So food that is not served to students, that is leftovers, that before it spoils, we're able to give to Just Food on a weekly basis. I believe every Thursday, is that right? They do deliveries
From all the school buildings.
And so we are combating waste in a slightly different way, but have not really solved the problem or have a solution for kind of the post-consumer products. But if anyone is interested, talking with school principals, there are a couple school buildings within our district that are able to manage and coordinate share tables, but they do so with volunteers or staffing within the building, and school principals need to be looped into those conversations if patrons are interested, kind of in the similar vein to marathon clubs and how those got started, and those are kind of sustained through our elementary schools. If we wanted to use a similar model for share tables, that might be an option. So any interested patrons should talk to their school principal about that. And then finally, we talked about the superintendent's job description and how we haven't really looked at that document or updated that document in quite a few years. I think it predates my term on the board, so, and maybe even, I don't, anyway, we need to look at it again and we need to update it. And luckily, we have a lot of good data from our recent efforts to kind of survey the community about what we're looking for in a superintendent. And so Shannon has actually volunteered to take the current job description that we have, the superintendent evaluation form that we adopted to utilize, that Dr. Stubblefield filled out tonight in preparation for that evaluation process, along with kind of those characteristics that we're looking for in a superintendent and kind of our district mission and vision, kind of melding all of those four things together into a job description that better matches what we expect from the superintendent. And then we're going to utilize that document to fill in the evaluation tool in a much more organized and orderly way in terms of making sure that our expectations are outlined and what we're evaluating are tied directly to those expectations in a way that matches what it is that we expect from our district superintendent, which I think is really great. And thank you, Shannon, for volunteering to do that first task. After she completes that, we'll look at it through policy, but then it'll come to the entire board to actually adopt. So be looking for that as well.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Other items to share, things to report on? Marcel?
Before the executive session, I was at the Horizon 2020 Steering Committee meeting. As you know, we had the comprehensive plan draft out to the community for comments, and they received a significant number of comments. And so today, we actually got emailed the comments ahead of time, but we were formally presented with the comments today and had some discussion on those comments. It was the first time the community had a chance, because this was really the first really significant draft of the plan. There was other aspects that people commented on earlier, but this was the first draft. And so I think it generated a lot of commentary, both from individuals as well as groups within the community. So there were some significant, and they were wide-ranging, some pushing one way, others pushing another way from the plan. So it was good. I think generally the plan is going to kind of, in the format of it, it will still kind of stay where we have it at this point. There's particular aspects of it that really benefit the district in terms of there's going to be a focus. The plan currently, as it's structured, is to provide more maximization of infill before we expand outward to help manage growth. So that will help us maximize our neighborhood schools and current schools, maximize their use before we have to build new, hopefully. There's some focuses on open green space, park space, public transportation, walkability, bikeability, those aspects that feed into some of our safe routes to school, preserving local farmland ties to our farm to school programs and some things like that. And so I think I had to leave the meeting early to get to the executive session, but I think generally the feeling was that the plan, the focus that we have, it will still stay that focus. So the plan at this point is staff is going to take all of those comments and go through them in more detail, provide us, and then look at the plan and provide kind of nuances, updates, and then we'll have that probably will take 60 to 90 days again to go through, because there was 117 pages of comments. Then they will provide that back to us, so it'll be after the first of the year. We'll probably go through each of the chapters in detail, discussing, making sure that we're still online with where we go with the plan at that point. And then after that, they still have to go. It'll be a work session, a joint session with the planning, city, and county commissions to go over it. And then after that, each of them will have to approve it separately as well. And likely there'll be more pushback from different groups within the community on the plan at that point too. So, but I'm pleased with where the plan has ended up at this point. And I hope that it stays in that same general format. I think it's good for the district, for ourselves moving forward. So, like I said earlier, it's going to extend beyond the first of the year. So likely that'll be another committee that you'll need to fill when I'm off. Okay.
Thank you for that report. I did attend the Public Incentive Review Committee had a special meeting within this last month to approve an industrial revenue bond to help Boys and Girls Club complete their construction project. What it basically does is provide them with a financing tool which allows them to not pay sales tax on their construction materials. Boys and Girls Club is actually a not-for-profit and is exempt from sales tax, but one of the state's loophole laws, it does not apply to construction. So we did approve that, and so that'll be going forward. Great, thank you. Melissa?
I had the opportunity to attend Deerfield Site Council meeting, and the following, about
I think 2 days later, they had their first ever Students of Color meeting for families, and the principal there, Joni Appleman, she did a great job as far as reaching parents through a resource called S'mores, I guess. And she had over 20 in attendance, and she's offered some of those resources. She passed it along to some administrators in other schools, and she was very pleased with the outcome. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend at that time the actual Student of Color's meeting, but she reported back that it went really well and it was successful, so kudos to her.
Great, glad to hear about it. Anybody?
I, on November 17th, sat on a panel for Leadership Florence on equity with, it was myself and a couple administrators and also some teachers in the district, which one included one of our co-chairs for the Equity Council. And we had a really great conversation, good questions, and some of the feedback that we received from the organizers of Leadership Florence was that after our panel was done, it actually sparked a conversation that was pretty robust in the room with the group, and that for some of those people, this was the first time they even knew that the district did equity work, which I thought was pretty interesting, and also that they'd ever really had a conversation about equity. So I thought that it was good to be a part of it.
All right. Thank you all for sharing about all the things that have been going on. I really appreciate it. All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Our consent agenda items are those that are considered routine and are adopted by one motion unless any board member or the superintendent requests that an item be removed. The item or items removed are voted on separately. First of all, is there anything that we need to remove? No, okay. Jessica has some retirements to recognize this evening.
There are 3 retirements. Michael Heimer, who was a teacher for 5 years in our district. Kalila Benz, who worked as a para for 24 years of service with our district. And Linda Bush, who was in food services for 17 years. So thank you for your devotion to our district.
Great, thank you very much. Okay.
And I just want to say, Kalia was a teacher who transitioned to be a parent this year, so she actually teacher for about 23 or 24 years. So, but she then came back to be a para.
Great, well, we appreciate their service very much. Okay, motion on the consent agenda.
I'll move the Board of Education adopt the items listed on the consent agenda.
Second it?
Okay,
Deason?
Yes.
Fincher?
Yes.
Harmon?
Yes.
Ingram?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Kimball?
yes.
Sandburn?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to our first business item this evening, a discussion of the South Middle School name change proposal. Anna Stubblefield, interim superintendent, and myself and Jessica.
Okay, so I will start just to give everyone some background before the discussion started. After the last meeting, the board said that we would form a committee, and the sole purpose of this committee will be to recommend a school name change to the board for approval with the following guidelines. This will be an open committee, so anyone who is in support of changing the name can attend the meeting. The first meeting will be held December 7th at 4:00 p.m., and it will be at NAS, which is located at Centennial. We will get that information out to spread it more widely, but the committee will be facilitated by Jennifer Atokney, coordinator of the Native American Services, Carol Cadu Blackwood. She is the committee member and who also sent us the initial request to change the name. Keith Jones, who's the South Middle School principal, and a representative from Haskell. And Jennifer and Carol have so kindly said they will reach out to Haskell because they know who's been involved. So once we know that name, we will add that. The sole purpose of this committee, as I stated before, will be to make a recommendation for the name change. So if there are individuals who have a different opinion, we ask that you continue to send your emails directly to board members, because that particular meeting is not to debate whether there will be a recommendation for a name change, is to come up with the name change. The other charge to the committee is to determine if South will remain in the new name. recommended to the board. So whatever and the last component is the committee will provide 2 options for the name change, with one only being a person and the other a non-person, at least. And so from those 2 recommendations, whatever you come with, the committee, we ask that if South is to be included, that is included in the recommendation, so that the board won't have to make the determination. They will just vote on the recommended name change.
Right. Board members have any questions or comments about the recommendation regarding the committee? It was clearly the consensus of the board at the last meeting to move forward with considering the name change. Marcel, I know you couldn't attend. Did you have anything that you wanted to share on that?
No, I did listen to the recording, so I saw what went on. I think, I'm generally in consensus with most people here that I generally feel that this was probably, personally at this point, an appropriate thing to consider. And I like the fact, I think, that having a committee come up with a name for us to vote on, I think is the appropriate thing to do.
Great. Any other comments? We do have a couple of public comments, so we'll do those afterward.
I just had one more comment, and I appreciate that group of community members is willing to take time to study this issue and come up with a recommendation, and to thank Jennifer Atokny for being willing to facilitate.
Great. We'll do our public comment on this item. Our first one is Alan Hollinger. And I'm going to just read the audience participation guidelines before we get started. The USD 497 Board of Education appreciates patrons taking time to talk to us about our policies and procedures. We set aside time during every meeting to hear from the public. This is your time to share our opinions. We ask that you avoid making comments of a personal nature about any district employee or student, including the use of personal names. While you are not required to share your contact information, we ask that you do so in order to follow up with any specific concerns you may have. In such cases, a board member, the superintendent, or another staff member may be in touch with you to refer your concerns to the appropriate administrator. At that time, we encourage you to share as many details relative to your specific concerns as you are willing to share. We ask that you limit your comment to 5 minutes, please, and thank you for sharing your thoughts with the board.
I'll be real quick. My son just called. His truck broke down. The reason I wanted to speak to you was both my boys attended South Middle School. I spoke to them on different occasions, and they're in support of the name change, and so are my wife and I. So I just wanted to publicly say, I've heard different board members get different type of emails, but I wanted to do it in person, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hollinger. We appreciate that. Okay, and the other public comment is from Steve Cadu. Mr. Cadu? Did you want to make a public comment? Okay. Okay. Right, on the discussion about the process. If you want to make a comment about that, you can do that at the microphone. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes.
We are having it be an open committee, so anybody who wishes to participate in the process to select the names to be recommended can attend that meeting on December 7th? Yes, okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Steve Cadu. I'm a parent and patron of USD 497. It's my understanding that the board just a minute ago approved the committee members or the process.
We haven't voted on the recommendation. Actually, we don't have a motion. I'm not sure that we need to vote, but absent any objection from board members about the process that was outlined by Dr. Stubblefield, that would be the process that we're using going forward.
Well, of course, I support, and I've spoken here before, my position is for the Billy Mills name change. But I would like to point out to the board this issue. We attended a equity council meeting about 4 weeks ago or thereabouts. I don't have the minutes with me, but it was about 4 weeks ago. The Equity Council, which is a subcommittee of the school board, am I understanding that correct?
It's an advisory committee to the board and the district. That's correct.
And that committee recommended the name change process also. Is that what you understand?
So, the committee is supportive of the name change, and so yes, in that regard, what they recommended was that we move forward with learning about the name change. And so what we've done tonight is we've identified that we're going to have a committee.
My concern and possibly complaint is do I call it miscommunication or misunderstanding of, we've had site council meetings at South. I asked for rules and procedure at that meeting. I believe I was told there wasn't any. I'm really, I just don't believe that full transparency has been practiced in this process. Yes, a name change is rare. I understand that, but I think I would like to lodge a formal complaint to this school board that there's not a clear process, procedure, practice on what's been, what's transpired. That's my statement to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cadieux. We'll take that feedback and have some discussion and provide some follow-up, and I appreciate that. Okay, that concludes the public comment that we have. Any other thoughts the board would like to share? Absent any other comments by the board, then the direction to staff is we will move forward with the process that Dr. Stubblefield outlined. So,
If we have contact information for individuals that have provided public comment to us around this issue, if we could make sure that we get an email out to them around the plan, I think that would be helpful. I think maybe there's some miscommunication about what the process is going to look like. I do think our intention is to make sure that the voices that are impacted have the opportunity to be heard in terms of the ultimate decision that is made. And so I apologize if that's not how this is coming across to members of the community. But yeah, essentially, there will be a separate subcommittee that will study this issue. Jennifer Atokny is going to facilitate that, and then that committee will bring a recommendation to the board about what the name ought to be.
And the reason we did that is because the recommendation a couple weeks ago had 5 or 6 different options listed, and we as a board wanted to narrow that down. Right, and so if we could just have 1 or 2.
I'm sorry, if you'd like to make a public comment, can you let me have your form and I'll have you come to the microphone, please. Mr. Stanley Hayden, thank you.
I'm not good at this, but I'm confused. Now, you set up a committee,
An open committee.
an open committee of 3 people?
No,
No,
anyone's willing, or anyone's able to come. So those 3 people will definitely be there, and then other community members who
So
are
it's open to the
interested.
public
It's open to the,
on December 7th.
right, the idea is that we
What
wanted,
o'clock?
we wanted to make sure that anybody that wanted to participate in that discussion had the opportunity to attend and participate, but the people that we've identified in the recommendation from staff are going to help facilitate.
Centennial,
It's at Centennial, that's correct, where
on
Native
Louisiana
American.
Street.
Right, where Native
got you.
American,
Thank you very
Native American Student Services offices, which is where Ms. Atokny has her office. So, and that way, the charge from the board being there's not going to be a debate about whether to change the name. We want the recommendation to narrow down the recommendation about what the name, what we're being asked to change it to. So I'm sorry if that wasn't entirely clear earlier. Sure. Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right. Any other thoughts?
And then community members that have concerns one way or the other is whether the name change should happen at all should contact us.
Right, and our,
Yeah.
that meeting is only if you are interested in helping to choose the new name, not, if you have concerns about the fact that the board is discussing a name change, please email either board members individually, or you can use the schoolboard@usd497.org email, and that goes to all 7 of the board members, and you will receive a response to your email, so thank you.
And then again, the committee will make a recommendation that will come before our body, so anyone in the public can also come to the meeting where we deliberate and discuss it to provide comment as well.
Right, that's correct.
Do we know when that's likely to happen? Are we expecting this committee to finish their work within the one meeting on December 7th, or is that to be determined?
So when I spoke with Jennifer, Keith, and Carol, I did say if they have a recommendation that we would bring it to the board on December 11th. If not, it will be the second January meeting because new board members taking their position in the first board meeting.
Okay.
They may, it's a chance that they'll have something December 11th if they come to consensus on the meeting on the 7th.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to our next item, which is a report and approval for a recommendation regarding the 2018-19 calendar with Jeannie Friedel, Woodlawn Principal, and Jill Anderson, co-chair of the calendar committee. Jeannie is also a co-chair of the calendar committee. Thank you.
Good evening. Jeannie Friedel, Woodlawn Principal.
Jill Anderson, teacher at Kennedy.
Although we know that you will want to examine the parent, staff, community survey results for possible adjustments to the calendar, we wanted to get a first draft to you. We've had a lot of public inquiries as to dates of spring break, dates of the beginning of the year, weddings that are happening, and people that are planning. So as noted in the enclosure, we have included 2 changes that were made last year to that calendar in that we have consistent time for all middle school and high school students attending on that first day of school. Also, the addition of 2 elementary plan days with coinciding dates on which middle and high schools are not in session so that we have students across the board out on those days. Some new recommendations for this calendar, knowing that certified staff will need intensive professional development to effectively utilize PowerSchool, we're proposing to begin the staff school year 1 day early on Thursday, August 9th. So on that date, we'd have middle and high school attending PowerSchool PD, and then the elementary schools would have their building professional development or a combination of building professional development and work day. And then on Friday, we would flip-flop that and have the elementary have their PowerSchool PD while middle and high school have the building PD. And then also to begin the year and give our new superintendent a chance to address the entire staff, we're proposing that back-to-school kickoff and all-district PD day be Monday, August 13th. We've had that on a Friday these last couple of years. That would ensure that all of our staff, both certified and classified, are in attendance, as that first August 13th will be the first duty day for classified staff.
Our next point is that winter break would begin after the school day of Friday, December 21st. That being a full day for elementary, a half day for middle and high school, with recording and reporting in the afternoon for those certified teachers. Winter break would continue through the whole next week and the next week. And building PD then for teachers would be January 7th, students returning on January 8th. And this would give us back our several other additional days. To compensate for the extra day at the beginning for Power School, then we have worked into the calendar that the teachers would be compensated for that day. So the elementary staff would be compensated on March 8th, which is the conference time for the middle and high school days. And the high school would be compensated on February 22nd to catch up with the elementary parent conferences. That would allow that day, so there's no more days for the teachers on our negotiations. And then we also still have our weather makeup day, which we put in there for April 19th. And the last day for students is May 23rd, and staff would be May 24th.
Okay. Any questions?
I guess I have a comment. Thank you for thinking of coordinating both levels of schools. It's really difficult on families that have kids at both and have to take alternate days off. So I've heard that for years, and we've all experienced it for years. I think it really is considerate to our parents.
And it's an impressive winter break. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
You've made a lot of fans.
Just the way the calendar falls.
Luck of the draw.
Are we ready for a motion?
We're ready for a motion.
I move that the draft calendar for the 2018-2019 school year be adopted as proposed.
Second.
Do we have to call roll for this? Yeah, okay.
Fincher?
Yes.
Harmon?
Yes.
Ingram?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Kimball?
Yes.
Sandburn?
Yes.
Beeson?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much for
Thank
all of your
you.
work on the calendar. All right, our last item is apologize, I have too many windows open to actually be able to see my agenda. There's a report on student confidentiality and FERPA, which is the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, and staff confidentiality with David Cunningham, our Executive Director of Human Resources and Chief Legal Counsel.
Thank you. Good evening. So in the enclosure, you have a narrative type report, and what I wanted to do this evening, in the interest of time, is highlight a couple of things that I think are important. Under FERPA, the federal government enacted that in order to protect the privacy of students and parents. And so they operate from an educational records perspective, and that's pretty much anything that we gather or create or maintain on a student, regardless of the form in which we maintain it. So it could be handwritten notes, it could be typewritten materials, emails, student records in our student management system. Wherever we're keeping those records for current students would be an identifiable educational record. Most of the material that goes into there would be their general absences, discipline, academic records, and so forth. So all of that information is within the context of what FERPA defines as a record, and then specifically says personally identifiable information is important: name, address, name of parents, other identifiers, information that would be able to allow people to identify the student. And so they define those areas that we have to be careful about and maintain certain records in a confidential manner. They then contrast that with directory information, which is stuff that, even though the name of the student is considered personal information, in the directory side, that is something we can release. So the name of the student, their grade, not their grades, but their honors, and if you're an athlete, height and weight, you see those in the programs all the time. So they do allow certain kinds of things to be disclosed. We also have provisions under the law that allow parents to opt out of releasing directory information, and we have parents that do that. We maintain those records in Skyward, and so we're careful not to release that information. So if we're talking about anything related to a student from an academic perspective or a discipline perspective, then under the federal law, it's considered to be a private record and can only be released to the parent or an eligible student, and an eligible student is defined as one who is 18 years of age or older. A little exception there, a parent of an eligible student may still have access to records if they're providing primary support and taking that child as a tax deduction on their 1040. So we need to be careful about what information we release. Now, when it comes to the board, I can't share individual information from a student with an individual board member. But if it is necessary to discuss a student matter with the board, say a discipline matter, then we can adjourn into executive session where I can share that information, so we're protecting those interests under the federal provisions. The parent can certainly provide a release. There are also exceptions that in a health and safety situation, if it's necessary to share information about a particular student from a health perspective, let's say. EMS has been called and they're present, and we can share that information to protect them. In a discipline context, we can also share information if that is information, for example, law enforcement might need in order to ensure the health and safety of other students. Or we might have to share something with the health department in order to deal with health issues. So they have articulated specific exceptions when we can release records. A final area would be subpoenas. If we get a court order or a subpoena, then we would be able to release those records. We are required to notify the parent so they have an opportunity to address that from a legal perspective. So we're fairly limited in what we can do with respect to student records. And where we run into a challenge, obviously, is when we have multiple students involved in something that requires discipline. So what can we show? And our typical call is from the parent of one of the students who wants to see the video because we have video in the hallways. Well, video is a student record. So if that video is being used for discipline purposes, then we're going to need to navigate that and get releases. And we recently did that. We had a situation. One of the parents requested to see that video. The other parents of students involved were willing to say, yes, that's okay. They provided it in writing. We made the video available. But only with that specific release were we allowed to do that. So generally speaking, then we're providing general information to the parent that's wanting to view the video because the principal will have looked at it and then can articulate the actions that were involved and so forth. So it gets difficult, and sometimes parents are upset that they can't see for themselves exactly what was going on. But if we're not able to get those releases, we're kind of bound by the federal law in the context of what we can release. It also puts you in a bind because as individual board members, even if we've talked about it particularly if we've talked about it in executive session, you're kind of in that same position as our principals are in terms of sharing information. In the report, I collected from KASB a couple of examples of generic types of responses that we might be able to share with someone, acknowledging that maybe a student event occurred, but we're not able to talk about the specifics of that, but also assure people that we are dealing with any safety-related issues. So again, not always very satisfying information going to the person who is requesting it, but the way in which we approach it does protect the student's privacy interests. And generally, they have students, and they don't want their students' information out either, so it works out. But that gives you kind of a general kind of idea about what is controlling the release of student information, and it's the federal law. There are some other state provisions that get into surveys and things like that that I didn't address in here. If that's an interest later on, we can get into Student Data Privacy Act and I can't think of the name of the other one right now, but there's some other things out there that would also dictate the kind of data that we can and cannot obtain or share. From a staff perspective, it really boils down to what is an open record and what is not an open record. The board is a municipality, the school district is a municipality, and is subject to the Kansas Open Records Law. So in that context, personnel records are deemed to be confidential with the exception of name, position, salary, and length of service. So anytime that information is requested, we will gather those reports, and it happens occasionally, and we do release that information. Everything else really is just a confidential record. The statute on evaluation specifically says who can receive a copy of a person's evaluation, and it's limited to the board in executive session. At the board's direction, I can look at an evaluation. I also have the title of HR director, so in that context, I see things sometimes as well. But the only other entity that can actually see an evaluation without the written consent of the employee would be another school district that the person has applied for an open position. They can call and file a written request for a copy of their evaluation, and we can release it in that situation. So again, we have some rules in the statutes that specify what we can and cannot share with respect to staff information. Again, occasionally we run into situations where there is some interest in knowing more about what's going on, and you and I, you as a board and I as an administrator, oftentimes find ourselves, again, giving those generic answers about it being confidential information, and we're unable to share specifics. But it does protect you as a board. It protects you as an individual. It protects our administrators from potential liability in the event that confidential information is released, and that release of information causes some form of harm to the individual, and they bring a lawsuit against us. So both in the student context and in the staff context, we have a need to be very careful about what information we deem to be releasable. Bless you. Thank you. So that's kind of the overview of what's in that report, and in it you can kind of read some of the things that are personally identifiable information, or I don't know that I put all of the directory materials in there, but I can get it to you if you want it. So that kind of is just a brief summary of the report that you have as part of the agenda.
Questions for Dave? That was a really helpful summary. Thank you for putting that together, and it's really nice to have this as a written reference, because obviously these things come up from time to time for board members, and it's good information to have. Appreciate it.
Honestly, one idea that might be helpful is to put this in a Q&A format or like a brochure for when things like this do come up, I think, or even a website link on our website. It'd be helpful to direct people to actually read through this. In the time I've been on the board, there's been several incidents where it would be really helpful if this were spelled out in a way that was accessible to the public.
Sure. One of two ways of doing that. I mean, we can kind of take selected questions and do it. I mean, KASB puts out a school handbook that has several pages of information just on federal FERPA provisions. So we could pick some of those out and get permission from them to do that. So either way, we can get that put together and get that on the website.
Cool. Good idea. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
With that, our business is concluded. Thank you, Dave. All right. A motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.